Thank you, Lois. And I was invited to be on the panel here by Marty Stevens, who organized a lot of this program. And he said, I think as he was asking me, he said, now, I'm not really asking you to be on here for your expertise in any of the microfluidic products that we have here right now, but just to give some challenges as to what has happened in the past and what you may want to try and avoid in the newer tissue on a chip models. So I was initially interested in doing this, and then when he said this, I'm all of a sudden becoming a paleontologist, going back into the history of looking at monolayer cultures going on to the beginnings of three-dimensional cultures, or perhaps in the Age of Enlightenment, folks like John Locke looking to current primitive civilizations and trying to find out where they had gone wrong and where the current 16th century European master civilizations could continue. So with that as a preface, I'm also not going to really address some of these questions, but more the questions that go before those questions. And it's things that we ran into in the early 90s as some of the first three-dimensional cultures were becoming commercialized. And this would be mainly for things like skin and in some cases eye. And this was looked upon then as a great breakthrough, which it was, but nothing worked perfectly. And I think that's one of the concerns and areas of interest that we'll have to look through with the tissues on a chip. It's the reproducibility. Even after 20, 25 years of producing simple human skin tissue in vitro, every tissue does not come out as a perfect tissue. We work with these a lot in our laboratory, and we reject some at least every 2 months because we do, I think, a quite extensive quality control of each of the tissues that comes through. So even though the manufacturers themselves have QC'd them, we find failures in our lab at all the time. One of the problems with failures, and it's probably going to be more important with the tissues on a chip, is that it's extremely expensive to repeat a study. The materials and supplies are really quite high, and that makes it a major milestone that you want to miss. So we need to have robust tissues. But even if we don't, and we'll never have completely robust tissues that are going to work every time, so what you have to do is have the proper controls available, historic controls for both normal tissue, a treated tissue with some materials, in fact, two types of treated tissue, tissue treated with two or more types of known standard materials, as well as controls now not just on cytotoxicity, but a number of different parameters at the same time. And now, this is, of course, imperative for using these for any type of regulatory study. And of course, that's where the big jump comes in with what you can use for a screening purpose, and then what a regulatory agency is going to accept for submission, or what a regulatory agency itself is going to use the materials for. And a second level, I've got a few here, but maybe I'll just go on 2 or 3, is transparency of what happens. And this may not be as true with the tissue chips, humans on a chip and so forth, as it was with some of the first commercial products of things like skin and eye, where manufacturers were really linked to the profitability of the materials. They had put money into developing the techniques and the methodologies that they were going to use, and they wanted to keep as many things proprietary as possible. That can be a killer in this type of activity. This seems to be a more open field, which I would hope would continue. But still, there have to be commercial sources of these things if we're going to have standardized materials. But try and keep the transparency as much as possible. Black boxes aren't going to work. A number of early manufacturers of skin models, for example, had proprietary media. This makes it almost impossible for a toxicologist to really do a good interrogative study because you don't know what materials in the media may be suppressing various cytokine activities that would go on in the normal tissue. And it's like pulling teeth to get a really good explanation of what occurs in some of these proprietary media. We may be able to go to some more universal fluid in some of the microfluidics devices with the microphysiometers that's standardized, but we'd have to see. Cost is important, as I mentioned. And then movement into the regulatory agencies. One of the things that we found over the years was just because a certain level within the regulatory agency was interested in a new methodology or a three-dimensional tissue, that doesn't mean that the line reviewer who was going to look at a submission had any knowledge of the system that you were using at all. Mm-hmm. And even if there was and we ran into the situation about 2 years ago where there was an internal distribution of information of a new plan and a strategy for eye irritation within antimicrobials division of EPA, that certain in vitro models could be used, and there was a pilot program. Reviewers for a 6-month period after that sent applications back to individual submitters because they said we can't accept the in vitro data if there's no in vivo. And this was in a situation where there was already an EPA policy on that. So education across the board, beginning now, continue, and this is a good forum right now for the education to begin with, but it also has to go into the real regulatory areas, it has to be at the reviewer level as well. So you need training at that level to go forward. I've got a bunch more. I'll save those for later. Thanks.